Hello guys, welcome to Dr. Nightstare. I know you guys come here to relax and take a nap. So before we go, please hit like and subscribe. By the way, also tell me what time and where you guys listening from. Alright then. I pulled the rental van up the gravel drive, the tires crunching against the stones. Mr. Henderson, the estate agent, waited by the front door, a briefcase clutched in one hand. When I cut the engine, an absolute stillness descended. There was no birdsong, no rustle of leaves in the breeze that usually carried sounds. The air itself seemed to swallow any noise. A strange prickle ran along my arms. "It is very quiet," I remarked, stepping out of the van. My voice seemed to dissipate instantly, absorbed by the atmosphere. Mr. Henderson offered a tight smile, not quite meeting my eyes. Isolated, yes. Very peaceful. He gestured towards the dark wood door. "Shall we?" He opened the door, ushering me inside. The interior was colder than the late spring day suggested, and the quiet intensified, pressing in on my ears. My footsteps on the polished floorboards seemed loud, each echo a stark intrusion. I walked through the empty living room, the kitchen, and up the wide staircase. The house felt held. Every breath I took, every shift of my weight, resonated with unusual clarity. "It is a big place," I said, to fill the oppressive lack of sound. Mr. Henderson nodded, his gaze darting around the pristine walls. "Certainly. Plenty of space to make your own." He cleared his throat. "Everything is in order for your boxes." I dismissed the odd feeling, telling myself it was just the nerves of moving into a new, old house. I had always enjoyed solitude. This quiet was simply an extreme version of what I sought. I was tired. My imagination was working overtime. I would unpack, settle in, and soon enough, the house would feel like home. The absolute quiet was just a feature, not a warning. I carried the first box through the doorway. I carried the last small box into my bedroom, the quiet amplifying my every movement. I stripped the bedding from a plastic bag, making up the bed. The mattress felt surprisingly soft. I closed my eyes, seeking sleep. It arrived quickly, a deep, consuming blackness that pulled me down without dreams or memories. My awareness simply ceased, and the hours passed without thought or sensation. I woke with a jolt, a cold certainty in the air pressing against my skin. The room was still dark, but a sliver of dawn light outlined the window frame. I lay for a moment, listening, but the profound stillness remained. My eyes drifted across the wall beside the bed. There, etched deeply into the painted plaster, were two words. The letters were rough, gouged, carved with force into the brittle material. "Welcome. Home." I stared, a knot forming in my stomach. I reached out, my fingers tracing the jagged lines. This was not old damage from the edges of the cuts were too fresh, the exposed plaster bright against the faded paint. This was new. Someone had been in my room while I slept. A shiver ran through me, a cold dread clinging to my bones. It had to be a cruel prank, a twisted welcome from a neighborhood kid. That was the only logical explanation. I refused to consider anything else. I got out of bed, my movements hurried. I found a thick, moving blanket in one of the unpacked boxes. With shaking hands, I pushed my dresser against the wall, positioning it to block the carving from view. Then I wrestled the heavy blanket over the dresser, letting it drape down the wall, completely obscuring the words. I stepped back, my breath catching in my throat. The moment the blanket covered the carving, the air in the room seemed to thicken. The quiet, which had been a constant companion, now felt like a living entity, a suffocating weight. It pressed against my eardrums, filling my head with a strange, high-pitched ringing. The house did not just feel quiet anymore. It felt like a presence. It felt like it was watching, waiting. My initial dismissal evaporated, leaving only the chilling certainty that this house had greeted me, and it had been waiting for me to arrive. Days turned into a blur of unpacking, the house's profound stillness, a constant companion. I tried to ignore the subtle shifts, the way the kitchen door I was certain I had closed would later stand ajar. I would hear a soft thump from the upstairs landing, followed by a dragging sound, like something heavy being moved across the floorboards. I would climb the stairs, my heart quickening to find nothing out of place. The quiet returned, absolute. One morning, after a restless sleep, I found myself in the living room. My fingers brushed against the wall near the fireplace. 5 distinct indentations marred the painted plaster. They were pressed into the surface as though a hand had pushed with significant force. The marks were fresh, the edges sharp. I stood staring, my breath catching. No explanation came to mind. The house was not just quiet, it was active. The manifestations grew bolder. I would leave a light on in the hallway and find it off moments later. Objects I had placed carefully on shelves would be moved, sometimes only a few inches, sometimes to an entirely different surface. The sensation of being watched became a constant prickle on my skin. I stopped trying to rationalize these events. The house was changing, twisting itself around me. I felt the slow tightening of an invisible coil. I needed to clear the basement. It was full of forgotten belongings from previous tenants. I descended the wooden steps, each creak amplified by the thick air. The basement was cold, and a damp scent hung about the earthen floor. Cobwebs draped from exposed pipes and ancient shelves. In a dark corner, tucked beneath a dusty tarpaulin, I found a large wooden box. It was old, held shut with a rusted latch. My fingers fumbled with the clasp. It sprung open with a high-pitched squeal. Inside, nestled among faded newspaper clippings and dried leaves, was a collection of photographs. They were all portraits of individuals, smiling, some holding small boxes. They were all different people, different eras, but their expressions held a similar bright hope. A young couple, a man with a heavy beard, a woman with bright, curious eyes. My gaze snagged on one specific image. The last photograph showed my own face. I was smiling widely, holding a small packed box. It was a photo taken just a few days ago, on the day I moved in. I remembered the exact moment, my excitement for a new start. My smile felt frozen, a cruel mockery. My hands began to shake. I looked back at the other faces in the box, their smiles fixed, their eyes wide. They were all there, a silent gallery of every new beginning, every hopeful arrival. The house had collected them, one by one. I was not moving into a new home. I was stepping into a role. The house had waited for me. It had known I would arrive. The discovery of the photographs had stripped away all denial. The house was not just old or unsettling, it was a collector. It took new occupants, one by one, watching them settle, claiming them. I stood in the basement, the box of faces in my trembling hands, and the air around me grew cold. The quiet that had always surrounded the house now seemed to pulse, a living thing settling its weight upon me. I climbed the stairs, the photograph still clutched in my hand. My mind a storm of fear and dawning horror. I had to leave. I had to get out. I ran to the front door, my fingers fumbling with the lock. The deadbolt slid back with a sickening click, but the door would not open. I pushed, I pulled, I threw my shoulder against the heavy wood. It stood firm, unyielding, as though it had been fused to the frame. Panic clawed at my throat. I ran to the living room window, pulling back the curtain. The glass was opaque. dark, reflecting only my own terrified face. Outside, the world was gone, replaced by a solid, impenetrable blackness. The house had sealed itself. The walls began to vibrate, a low, resonant thrumming that worked its way into my bones. It was not a sound I heard with my ears, but felt in my chest, a deep current flowing through the very structure of the building. Then, from the vibrations, words began to coalesce, a dry, rasping whisper that seemed to come from every surface. "You came," the house breathed, the sound scraping against my sanity. "You belong." I fell to my knees, the strength draining from my limbs. The whispers grew louder, clearer, speaking directly into my mind. They spoke of the other faces in the photographs, of their slow acceptance, their eventual blending. They spoke of patience, of waiting, of the slow process of entanglement. The house had been patient with me, letting me unpack, letting me sleep, letting me discover. It had allowed me to believe I was still free, until the moment I had fully committed myself to its walls. I looked up, my eyes scanning the nearest wall. There, appearing as though etched from the very plaster before my eyes, were two new words, stark and accusing. "Yo, you." Stayed. A strange calm descended then, cold and absolute. The terror did not vanish, but it folded itself into something deeper, something permanent. I was not a tenant, I was an acquisition. The house had chosen me, not the other way around. It had wanted me, and it had claimed me. Its presence was no longer a haunting, but an intimacy, a part of my own being. It had settled around me, within me. I belonged to it, just like all the others. The whispers became a comfort, a constant presence, the house's embrace. I closed my eyes, accepting the quiet that was now my fate. The cake sat on the kitchen table, candles burning bright. 8 small flames danced. My family sang the birthday song. My father smiled. My mother held a camera. My brother giggled beside me. I blew out the candles. Sweet smoke curled into the air. A sound ripped through the window glass. The world fractured into sharp pieces. Something struck my chest. It felt like a punch. My breath left my body in a sudden rush. I fell from my chair. The floor was cold. My eyes found my mother. Her face was still. Blood bloomed on her shirt. My father lay beside her. My brother crumpled near the table. The air tasted metallic. My vision blurred around the edges. A heavy weight settled over me. My eyelids grew impossibly heavy. The last thing I heard was a quiet gurgle, then nothing at all. The world turned black. A sudden gasp pulled air into my lungs. It scraped against my throat. My eyes opened. A bright light shone directly above me. My body lay flat on something hard and cold. My head throbbed behind my eyes. I moved my fingers. They felt stiff. I could feel a rough sheet covering me. My skin was cold. A strange smell, clinical and sharp, filled my nostrils. I pushed at the sheet. It felt heavy. My chest rose with each breath. A man's voice called out. It sounded startled. Footsteps pounded down a hallway. A woman appeared in my line of sight. Her eyes were wide. She wore blue scrubs. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Another man joined her. He had a clipboard in his hand. He looked at me, then at the woman. He looked at the sheet. His face went pale. "She's breathing," the woman whispered. Her voice shook. The man with the clipboard dropped it. It clattered on the tiled floor. He reached for my wrist. His fingers were cold. He pressed 2 fingers against the pulse point. His eyes widened further. He looked at me, then back at the woman. "Pulse?" he stated. His voice was a choked sound, a strong pulse. The room began to fill with more people. Everyone wore scrubs. They spoke in rapid, hushed tones. They pointed at me. They checked their instruments. They checked them again. One woman ran a hand over my forehead. Her touch felt tentative. My skin was still cold. I tried to sit up. A wave of dizziness swept over me. I lay back down. My throat felt dry. I wanted water. They moved me. I was on a soft gurney. The wheels made a soft rolling sound. Bright lights passed above. They led me into a different room. This room had more machines. Wires attached to my chest. A cuff squeezed my arm. They talked about readings. They talked about vitals. They talked about a miracle. I heard the word impossibles many times. Days bled into each other. I stayed in that room. Doctors and nurses came and went. They took blood samples. They looked into my eyes with small lights. They pressed on my stomach. They listened to my heart with stethoscopes. My heart beat strong. My body felt fine. There were no wounds. The doctors shook their heads. They looked confused. They had no answers. My family was gone. No one spoke about it. I did not ask. It felt like a bad dream. One afternoon, a different person entered my room. He did not wear scrubs. He wore a dark sweater. It was Jude, my cousin Jude. His dark hair fell across his forehead. His eyes were dark too. He walked to my bedside. He looked at me. His expression was not surprised. He did not call for nurses. He just looked at me. "Charlie," he said. His voice was quiet. It held a knowing quality. I tried to smile. My lips felt stiff. Jude. He sat in the chair beside my bed. He did not touch me. He just watched me. His gaze felt heavy. It felt like he saw something no one else did. The doctors talked about my return. They called it a medical anomaly. They used long words. Jude simply looked at me. His eyes held no confusion. They held a different emotion. It was not sadness. It was not happiness. It was understanding. "You're back," he stated. It was not a question. It was a simple fact. I nodded. "I think so." My voice felt raspy. He leaned forward. His voice dropped lower. "They don't understand it. They never will." I frowned. "Understand what?" He met my eyes again. His gaze seemed to reach deep inside me. "That you're not really back. Not the way they think." A coldness settled in my stomach. It was not the cold from the morgue. It was a deeper, spreading cold. It felt wrong. His words suggested something about me had changed, something fundamental. I was still me. I felt like me. But Jude's eyes told a different story. They saw a difference. He saw a shadow where there should be light. He saw a tear in the fabric of what was real. A nurse entered the room then. She smiled brightly at Jude. She asked if everything was all right. Jude nodded slowly. He stood up. He looked at me one last time. His lips pressed into a thin line. He turned and walked out of the room. The cold feeling stayed with me. It clung to my skin. It seeped into my bones. The medical staff treated me like a miracle. Jude treated me like a secret. His eyes held a truth I could not yet name. It was a dark, unsettling truth. It made the air around me feel thick. I was alive. I was whole. Yet I felt like a stranger in my own skin. My own heartbeat seemed to echo differently now. It carried a strange, hollow sound. I was no longer just Charlie. I was something else. I was the impossible. I was no longer just Charlie. I was something else. I was the impossible. Life resumed a strange rhythm after the hospital. Aunt May and Uncle Arthur took me in, their house a quiet place filled with unspoken rules. Jude visited often. He just watched me with those dark, understanding eyes. I started school again. My classmates looked at me with curious glances. They knew I had died. They knew I was back. No one said a word about it. I felt like a fragile ghost walking among the living. The first incident happened during my 9th year. I climbed a tall oak tree in Aunt May's yard. I loved the strong branches and the view from the top. A loose branch gave way under my foot. I gasped for air. My hand slipped. I fell toward the hard ground. Time stretched. A strong jerk caught my shirt. My fall stopped. I hung upside down, tangled in a lower branch. My shirt fabric was ripped. I felt a sudden cold rush. I looked around the tree. No one stood there. Uncle Arthur found me moments later. He scolded me for being careless. He told me I was lucky. I just nodded. My heart still pounded against my ribs. I knew it was not luck. A few months later, I walked home from school. I crossed the street at the corner. A delivery truck sped around the bend. It came directly at me. I froze in the road. The truck horn blared loud. I could not move my feet. A sudden push shoved me hard onto the sidewalk. My knees scraped. The truck rushed past, wind buffeting my hair. I looked up. No one stood beside me. The street was empty. My breath hitched in my throat. My scraped knees burned. I just ran the rest of the way home. Aunt May bandaged my wounds. She lectured me about watching for cars. She thought I had tripped. I did not correct her. These strange near misses continued through my childhood. A brick fell from a chimney while I played below. A heavy shelf collapsed near my head in the library. A rusty nail appeared in my shoe on a hike. Each time I escaped without serious injury. Each time something intangible seemed to intervene, or a chilling void of absence followed the event. Aunt May and Uncle Arthur blamed my clumsiness. They attributed the incidents to childish imagination. They said I needed to be more careful. They said I was still recovering from a difficult experience. They took me to a kind woman who talked about coping with trauma. The woman asked about my feelings. She talked about bad dreams. She asked about ghosts. I shook my head. Ghosts seemed too simple. Then I started seeing him. I was 10 years old. I played alone in the park. He stood across the field near the tall sycamores. He was a boy with dark hair and pale skin. He looked about my age. He just watched me. His eyes were wide. They held no warmth. They conversed a thal of wide. I looked back. He was gone. The grass where he stood remained undisturbed. The next time, I was 12. I swam in the community pool. I held my breath under the water. I opened my eyes. He floated beside me. His dark hair waved around his face. His eyes stared straight into mine. They were not human eyes. They were black, empty voids. Terror seized me. I thrashed upwards, breaking the surface, gasping. I coughed water from my lungs. My heart hammered. I looked around the pool. No one else was near me. The other swimmers were far away. The boy was gone. I got out of the pool. My body shivered. I never went back to that pool. The incidents escalated. They became deliberate. I was 13. I walked home from a friend's house. It was twilight. The streets were quiet. A cold hand clamped over my mouth. A strong arm wrapped around my waist. I screamed, but the sound was muffled. I fought hard. I kicked. I bit the hand. The hand did not flinch. It smelled like damp earth. The boy dragged me towards the darker alleyway. I saw his face in the fading light. It was the boy from the park, the boy from the pool. His eyes were still black. His lips pulled back in a silent snarl. He had thin, dark hair. He was real. He was there. I struggled with all my might. My elbow slammed into his ribs. He grunted. His grip faltered for a second. I twisted free. I ran. I did not look back. I just ran. I ran all the way home. I burst through the front door. Aunt May looked up from her book. "What is it, Charlie?" she asked. Her voice was calm. "A boy," I gasped. "He tried to take me." My voice shook. Aunt May put her book down. She came to me. She ran her hand over my hair. "A boy, darling. Where?" "Outside," I said. "In the alley." He was pulling me. Uncle Arthur came from the kitchen. He listened. He went outside. He looked around. He came back inside. "No one is there, Charlie. The alley is empty." "But he was real," I insisted. "He had dark hair. He was pale." Aunt May sighed softly. "Charlie, it's getting dark. You must be spooked. You have a vivid imagination sometimes." Uncle Arthur nodded. "It's a lot of old houses around here. The shadows play tricks." They hugged me. They tried to comfort me. They believed I was scared. They did not believe a boy had attacked me. They thought it was a dream. They thought it was my trauma. I felt a deep, sickening loneliness spread through me. They could not see him. They could not understand. The boy began to appear more often. His presence felt like a cold whisper behind me. I heard his name once. I was 14. I sat on a bench outside the school. 2 older girls walked past. One spoke in a hushed voice. "Did you hear about Ren Oliver?" she asked. The other girls shivered. They never found his body. Just his clothes near the old well. He just vanished. They spoke of him like a local ghost story. The name Ren Oliver settled into my mind like a heavy stone. It felt wrong. It felt like a key. I knew the boy pursuing me was Ren Oliver. He was supposedly dead. He escalated his attempts. One afternoon, I walked by the river. Ren emerged from the trees. He walked slowly toward me. His eyes were like black holes. He did not speak. He held a large rock in his hand. My breath caught in my throat. I backed away. He moved faster. I turned to run. He tackled me from behind. We tumbled down the bank toward the swirling river. The rock slipped from his grasp. He pinned me against the muddy bank. His face was inches from mine. His breath was cold, like grave dirt. His fingers closed around my neck. They were icy. They squeezed. I clawed at his hands. I kicked. My vision blurred around the edges. This was not a dream. This was real. He wanted to kill me. A sudden flash of light caught his attention. He looked up. His grip loosened for a split second. I seized my chance. I pushed him with all my strength. I scrambled up the bank. I ran without looking back. My throat was raw. My body ached. I knew someone had driven by. I knew someone had saved me. I never saw the car. Ren was gone when I looked again. I arrived home frantic. My clothes were covered in mud. My throat felt bruised. I cried as I told Aunt May and Uncle Arthur. I told them his name. I told them Ren Oliver had tried to drown. I explained everything. Aunt May held me tight. Uncle Arthur called the police. 2 officers arrived. They listened patiently. They searched the riverbank. They found nothing. No footprints. No sign of a struggle. They returned empty-handed. They spoke to Aunt May and Uncle Arthur in low tones. I heard the word delusions. I heard the word delusions. I heard trauma. My family looked at me with pity. They looked at me with concern. They did not look at me with belief. They arranged for more therapy sessions. They thought I needed help coping with my past. They thought I needed help separating reality from my mind. They said I was seeing things. They said I was imagining danger. I was not imagining. He was real. He was death. He was coming for me. I became isolated. My friends saw me as strange. My family saw me as broken. Jude was the only one. He would watch me with those dark eyes. He never said I was wrong. He never said I was imagining things. He just watched me. His silent understanding was a heavy comfort. It was a terrifying confirmation. He saw what I saw. He knew what I knew. I stopped talking about Ren. I stopped telling them about the near-fatal incidents. I just learned to live with the fear. I learned to run faster. I learned to watch the shadows. Ren Oliver was not a dream. He was not a symptom of trauma. He was the impossible. He was the boy who should be dead. He was the one who sought to make me dead again. He was death itself, relentless in his pursuit. Every creak in the house, every rustle in the trees, every sudden chill became a sign. He was always there. He was always watching. He was always coming for me. My 18th birthday arrived cold and quiet. Aunt May had baked a cake, but the festive air felt thin, strained. Jude sat across from me at the kitchen table, his dark eyes fixed on my face. He had been insistent for days, his warnings growing sharper with each passing hour. "You cannot go out tonight, Charlie," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Please, just stay inside. Stay with us." I shook my head, a familiar frustration building. "I am 18, Jude. I am going out with Liz. It is my birthday." I believed I had outrun the shadow for long enough. Ren had not shown himself in months. Perhaps he was truly gone. My family's dismissals had slowly worn down my vigilance, convincing me I was safe, if only for a night. Aunt May entered the room then, carrying a stack of plates. She gave Jude a disapproving look. "Leave her be, Jude," Aunt May said gently. "She is a young woman. She needs to live her life." Jude stood up abruptly. He glared at Aunt May, his jaw tight. "You know nothing of this, May. You are blind to it." He turned and walked out, the anger in his stride shaking the floor. Aunt May just sighed, shaking the floor. Aunt May just sighed. A tired sound. I ignored Jude's desperate plea. I chose to believe my family's manufactured calm. Later that evening, the music pulsed at Liz's party. Laughter echoed through the house. For a brief time, I felt normal, free. Liz pulled me onto the makeshift dance floor, her bright smile contagious. We danced, forgetting everything but the rhythm. The night air was cool, smelling of damp earth and distant rain. I stepped out onto the porch for a moment, needing a breath of fresh air. The party noise muffled behind the closed door. A shadow detached itself from the ancient oak tree in Liz's yard. It moved with an unnatural speed. My blood froze. This was not the Ren I knew. His form was impossibly tall, his skin stretched taut and gray over sharp bones. Enormous, leathery wings, like a bat's, unfolded from his back, scraping against the bark of the tree. His eyes, now entirely black, burned with a cold, ancient malice. His mouth, a ragged tear in his face, curved into a silent, cruel smile. He was a monstrous parody of the boy I remembered. He was a living nightmare. I stumbled back, gasping. He was no longer just a boy. He was a creature of the dark, born of the forest's hidden places. His presence radiated pure, unbridled hunger. He took one step, then another, his gait jerky and inhuman. My mind screamed at me to run, but my feet were rooted to the spot. Liz opened the door then, stepping out onto the porch. "Charlie, are you okay?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. She saw Ren. Her eyes widened, her smile vanished. A scream tore from her throat. Ren moved with a speed no human could match. He lunged past me. His taloned hand closed around Liz's throat. Her scream ended abruptly, a strangled sound. He lifted her effortlessly from the ground. Her feet dangled, kicking uselessly in the air. Her face turned blue. He squeezed. I watched, helpless, paralyzed by a terror deeper than any I had known. Liz's body went limp. Ren dropped her to the ground. She lay still, her eyes staring blankly at the sky. My paralysis broke. Rage surged through me, hot and fierce. I saw the glint of my father's old hunting knife, a birthday gift from Uncle Arthur, tucked into my boot. I pulled it out. Ren turned his head slowly, his black eyes fixing on me. He took a step forward, his grotesque wings twitching. I lunged at him, knife raised. I plunged the blade deep into his chest. It sank in with sickening ease. He made a guttural sound, a strangled shriek that was not human. His wings thrashed. He stumbled back, clutching at the wound. Black ichor, thick and viscous, poured from the gash. He fell to his knees. His body spasmed violently. He collapsed onto the ground beside Liz, his monstrous form convulsing. He stopped moving. A strange metallic smell filled the air. People rushed out from the party, drawn by Liz's scream. Someone shrieked at the sight of Wren, another at Liz's still form. Aunt May was among them. She saw me, the knife in my hand. Her face went ashen. Jude pushed through the crowd, his eyes wide with a terrible knowing. "He is dead," I whispered, my voice raw. "I killed him." I stared at Wren's body, the wound gaping in his chest. Then the wound began to close. Slowly, impossibly, the torn flesh knitted itself back together. The black ichor receded. The color returned to his skin, the gray fading to a sickly pallor. His chest rose with a slow, deliberate breath. His black eyes snapped open. He sat up, completely healed, completely whole. He looked at me, a flicker of ancient amusement in his eyes. Aunt May grabbed my arm, her grip like iron. "We must go, Charlie. Now." Her voice was urgent, desperate. Jude was already pushing through the shocked onlookers. They pulled me away, away from Wren, away from Liz. We ran, away from the party, away from the scene of impossible death and impossible revival. They drove me to Aunt May's house. The living room was lit by a single lamp, casting long, dancing shadows. Aunt May paced the floor, wringing her hands. Jude stood by the window, his back to us, his shoulders tense. The terrible understanding in his eyes was clearer now. "Charlie," Aunt May began, her voice trembling, "there is something you need to know, something we have kept from you." She sat heavily on the sofa, her face etched with a century of pain. "Your life, after that night, it was not a miracle. It was a bargain." My head reeled. "A bargain? What are you talking about?" Jude turned from the window. His eyes met mine, filled with a deep, crushing sorrow. "A fey bargain, Charlie. One our family made long ago out of desperation. Over 100 years ago, a sickness swept through our line. Our ancestors went to the forest, to the old king, a powerful fey lord. They begged for a cure, for their children to live." Aunt May picked up the story, her voice low. "The old king demanded a price. He offered to save our line, to ensure our children would always return from the brink of death. He offered you, Charlie, a continued existence. But in exchange," she paused, her breath catching, "in exchange he demanded 2 human sacrifices. 2 children, to be chosen from outside our family, to be given to him. They would be taken into his realm, converted into his heirs to serve him forever. They would be tortured, remade, stripped of their humanity, becoming something else, something dark and eternal." My blood ran cold. "Sacrifices? What are you saying?" Jude stepped closer. "Wren Oliver was one of them, Charlie. He was taken when he was a boy. He was given to the Fey King to secure your life. The other was a girl, much younger. Emily Thorne. She vanished from the next village a year after Wren. They were gifts. For you." "No," I whispered, shaking my head. The horror of it clawed at my throat. "No, that cannot be true." Aunt May's eyes were full of tears. "It is true, Charlie. Every time you have faced death, every time you have escaped, it is because of them. Because Wren and Emily are suffering in the Fey realm, being twisted into what you saw tonight. Their endless torment fuels your continued life. You are a passive beneficiary, Charlie. You live because they die, over and over again, in ways you cannot imagine. You live because they become monsters." The truth slammed into me, a crushing, suffocating weight. My survival, my impossible return was not a miracle. It was a monstrous transaction. My life was built on a foundation of unimaginable suffering, on the stolen humanity of Wren Oliver and Emily Thorne. Wren was not death pursuing me. Wren was a victim, a sacrifice, twisted and returned by an ancient, cruel bargain, a consequence of my family's dark compact. He was trying to take back what was stolen from him. He was trying to end the endless agony I had condemned him to. He was trying to kill me, not out of malice, but out of a tortured desire for his own true death. I was alive, but the cost was an eternity of pain for others. The impossible truth shattered my world. My life was a lie, a cruel, grotesque bargain with a monstrous king. The morning sun streamed through our kitchen window, warming the tiled floor where Alice sat coloring. Her crayon scratched a rhythm across the paper. I watched her from the counter, stirring my coffee, a smile on my face. This little house in Florida offered a new beginning. My teaching job at the elementary school was going well. The children were engaged. Every evening we would walk to the small park down the street. Alice skipped ahead. Her laughter echoed. We built a steady routine here, and a sense of belonging settled over us. Finally, everything felt secure. "Mommy," Alice said one afternoon, her voice small, her crayon suddenly still. She pointed towards the hallway, her finger trembling slightly. "There's a creepy man watching me." I knelt beside her, checking the empty space, explaining that shadows sometimes played tricks and our house was safe. But Alice kept seeing him, describing a tall figure standing in the doorway of her room at night, always just out of sight when I looked closely. My heart, once settled and steady, began to feel a persistent tremor of anxiety. Dishes would fall from the counter when no one was near them, shattering on the tiled floor, and a cold draft brushed through the living room even with all the windows shut tight. Alice started waking up with nightmares. Her scream sharp in the dark, clutching me tightly and whispering about the man who wanted to play. The sense of peace I had carefully built around us began to crack, and I found myself staring into empty corners, feeling watched, questioning what was truly real inside our new home. I bought a small camera and set it up in Alice's room, hoping to capture proof or dismiss my fears. Later that night, I watched the footage, seeing Alice sleep at first. Then a dark shape moved across the wall near the closet door, and a toy car on her dresser slowly rolled off the edge to hit the floor. Alice stirred but did not wake, and a coldness seeped into the room on the recording before the closet door slowly creaked open without a breeze. My terror sharpened after watching the recording, and the entity became bolder. Doors slammed without human touch, and whispers drifted from empty rooms, just out of my hearing. The air inside our home turned thick and heavy, pressing down on my chest, and objects did not just move now, they were thrown with force. Alice's porcelain doll shattered against the kitchen wall as I watched one evening. The presence was no longer vague dread, becoming a clear threat, and it felt truly oppressive. I knew this thing was real. Its anger filled every corner of the house, a tangible weight, and only fear remained. We were trapped inside our home with this thing, our escape blocked by an unseen terror that wanted us for something terrible. It pushed us back, a solid weight pressing against my chest and driving Alice and me into the small bathroom. The door slammed shut, echoing a finality that made my stomach clench. The air inside the small space turned icy, and a crushing pressure bore down on us, stealing my breath. Dark shadows flowed from the corners of the room, swirling together into a shape that had no form but held immense power. It struck my arm, a brutal impact that sent a sharp pain through me, and I cried out. Alice screamed, her small body trembling against mine. The light bulb above us exploded in a shower of glass, plunging the room into near darkness. I saw the small, high window above the toilet, the only way out. I shoved Alice towards it with all my strength, pointing upwards. "Go, Alice, run," I urged, my voice raw and hoarse. She scrambled onto the toilet, her small hands fumbling with the latch, and then she pushed the window open. The cold air from outside rushed in, a brief moment of hope. The entity surged forward, its dark mass lunging towards Alice. I threw myself in front of her, feeling its icy grip close around my body, pulling me away from the window. I felt hands on my throat, squeezing, dragging me back into the consuming darkness of the house. Alice cried my name one last time, a desperate fading sound, as she dropped to the ground outside and ran away, her small shape disappearing into the blackness of the night, searching for help I knew might never come for me. I opened my eyes to cold water. The ocean held me naked, and my memory was gone. I did not remember how I got there. A small fishing boat approached, Yusuf at the tiller. He pulled me aboard, wrapping a rough blanket around my shoulders, and his face showed shock and relief. "Only an hour," he said, his voice strained. "You just went under for an hour." I looked at him. A deep strangeness radiated from his familiar face. And he looked different too, his eyes holding a new worry. We did not speak much on the ride back to the shore. The sun beat down, and the sand felt hot beneath my bare feet. Everything looked the same, but it all felt wrong, altered. My skin felt strange, and the air tasted different. A silent tension stretched between us, a shared awareness of something shifted. We reached the quiet beach, the small boat scraping sand. The world waited, unchanged on the surface, yet something terrible had happened within it, and I did not know what it was. Yusuf dropped me at the hotel, his worried face a blur as I rushed inside. I locked the door quickly. My wet clothes were gone, my skin was dry. I walked into the bathroom. My reflection stared back from the mirror. The scrapes from the rocks on the beach had vanished from my legs. The shallow cuts that should have been there were gone completely. My skin felt smooth and unbroken. I touched my face, my fingers tracing the line of my jaw. There was a subtle tautness to my muscles, a dormant power I had not possessed before. My body felt different. The air in the room carried a distinct odor of dust and old linen. I could hear the distant traffic outside, each car a separate sound. The quiet murmur of voices from the floor below traveled up through the walls. My ears picked up the creak of the building. The scent of salt clung to my skin. Yusuf had left a small plate of fruit on the table. The vibrant colors of the mango and papaya made my stomach turn. I felt no hunger, only a rising sickness at the thought of eating. My throat closed. The idea of food was disgusting. A chilling unease settled deep inside me. My mind raced with jumbled pictures, fragments of ocean depths. A cold dread seeped into my bones. The outside world felt distant and irrelevant. I did not want to see Yusuf or anyone else. Their simple kindness would be unbearable. I needed to be alone. The room, once a comfort, now felt like a prison keeping me from something important. I walked to the window. The bright street below seemed alien. The desire for human contact had evaporated. My thoughts were scattered, shifting like sand. My own self felt alien. I was changing. I flew back to my city, the buildings and streets a blur of something once known, now distant. My apartment stood exactly as I left it, but the air felt thin, empty. I walked through the rooms, touching the furniture, looking at photographs. The smiling faces in the frames, friends, family, a life I had owned, now seemed to belong to a stranger. I called my partner. Their voice sounded far away, concerned, but the words did not reach me. I hung up the phone. I felt like an actor in a play, wearing familiar clothes but playing a different role, and the script was forgotten. The apartment was not home. A low, persistent vibration resonated through the floorboards, an insistent pulse deep within the earth. It started subtly, a barely perceptible tremor, then solidified into a steady resonance that never ceased. It filled my ears, vibrated against my teeth, and settled in my bones. I lay in bed, the vibration a constant companion, preventing sleep. When sleep finally came, it brought the ocean. I saw the cave, its walls slick and dark, water churning in the deep. Shapes moved within the shadows, fluid and immense. A powerful presence resided there, a singular being, and other forms swam around it, silent and watchful. I saw myself among them, not observing but participating, a part of their existence. The dreams were clear, full of detail, and they pulled at me with an urgent force. I woke with a gasp, a yearning so sharp it made my chest ache. The vibration in the apartment intensified, a rhythmic beat calling me back. I wanted the cold, the darkness, the pressure of the deep. I yearned for the being, for the others, for the place where I had felt truly alive. My old life had no hold on me. The city offered no peace. Each street, each face, each sound felt like a barrier, separating me from the profound truth within the deep. The insistent vibration resonated not just through the floorboards but through my very bones, a relentless summons. My old life had no meaning. The images of friends and family felt like faint echoes from a dream, utterly disconnected from my new reality. This existence on the surface was a pretense, a hollow shell I inhabited with a growing sense of detachment. I watched my reflection in the dark window glass. The eyes staring back were my own, yet they held a knowledge that stretched beyond human understanding, a primal awareness of cold currents and crushing pressure. My body felt taut, ready, a vessel transformed for a different world. The yearning for the cave was no longer a dream, it was a consuming hunger, an undeniable pull that resonated with every beat of my changed heart. I knew where I belonged. I would return to the waters, to the cave, to the being and the others. There was no other choice. This was my destiny, my true home. I booked passage on a small vessel, a one-way journey into the deep ocean. I packed nothing for the journey, for I needed nothing where I was going. My acceptance felt cold and clear, a final decision made with absolute certainty. The pull was too strong to resist. Perhaps you will feel it too, one day. The call from the depths, an invitation to a different kind of existence. This new year, 2026, would mark a change, a new start towards a healthier me. I had resolved to eat salads and greens, lean meats and early mornings. First, however, a final elaborate hurrah was necessary. One last culinary indulgence before my regimen began. I loved cooking, adored every sizzling moment in my kitchen. The richer the dish, the better it tasted. My heart delighted in concocting meals that would alarm nutritionists, dishes brimming with heavy creams, butter, and ample fats. There was a deep satisfaction in gathering ingredients, preparing them with careful precision, and then watching them transform. The kitchen became my world as I orchestrated the creation of these edible masterpieces. The aroma alone promised pleasure. Eating felt like a sacred ritual, a celebration of flavor and texture, a testament to my skill. Every bite was an affirmation of living life to its fullest, even if it might shorten it. I savored each mouthful, allowing the richness to coat my tongue. I approached the preparation with rigorous precision. Every ingredient received careful examination and precise measurement. The cast-iron pan held an egregious amount of golden oil. Melted butter pooled and mingled, creating an unctuous base. The oven began to radiate its heat, warming the kitchen air. A rich aroma of cooking food soon filled every corner of my home, promising imminent pleasure. I set the dining table with a single candle. Its small flame cast shadows on the walls. Eating this elaborate meal was a solitary affair, a moment dedicated to the sensory experience. I cherished each step, from the heat to the scent to the final bite. My stomach rumbled with anticipation for the main course. The cooked meat awaited its moment. A sound rose from the basement. My final meal was screaming for help from the basement. That was normal. The last 6 had been excited too. The meal was almost ready. I adjusted the single candle on the table. My resolution remained firm. Tomorrow, the change would begin. No more elaborate indulgences like this one. From tomorrow, it would be salads and lean meats. For me, from tomorrow, it was grill only. I observed him stir on the cold concrete floor. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then widened as they adjusted to the dim surroundings. Ropes held his wrists and ankles tight against the rough surface. I stepped closer, allowing the bare bulb's harsh light to fall across my face. He blinked, trying to clear his vision, and a tremor ran through his body when he finally registered my features, seeing me clearly for the first time without the mask of Coach Joe. The victim stared at me, and his jaw dropped as recognition spread across his face. Pure terror then filled his wide eyes. He tried to scream, but the gag muffled the sound into a desperate gurgle, his thrashing against the ropes a primal struggle. He now knew his trusted mentor was his executioner, and his demise was certain. The dread radiating from him promised a delicious satisfaction. I savored that dread. It was a taste I recognized from my earliest memories. My father was a man of particular tastes. He believed true discernment came from exploring all avenues of flavor. He introduced me to meat that was not found in any market. He introduced me to human flesh when I was a child, explaining its superior properties. He taught me how to butcher with precision, how to prepare each cut to maximize its unique qualities. The lean muscle offered a gamey richness. It possessed a robust quality. The fatty deposits, rendered slowly, yielded a delicate, almost sweet oil. I learned to appreciate the subtle differences from person to person, the nuances of age, diet, and lifestyle reflected in the tissue. A youthful tenderness in some, a sinewy resilience in others. The liver, seared quickly, had a metallic tang that awakened the palate. The brain was soft and creamy, dissolving on the tongue with an earthy note. This was not merely sustenance, it was an art form. It was a philosophy of consumption. My father had shown me a world beyond conventional limitations, a realm where true flavor resided. My purpose became clear: to refine this art, to achieve the ultimate gastronomic experience. This was my legacy, my passion, my undeniable purpose. My mind turned to new endeavors, to a different kind of palate experience. The adult flesh, while satisfying, often possessed a certain lean robustness. My ultimate goal remained the perfect balance of texture and taste, a rare tenderness. I had considered this step for some time. A child, I mused, possessed a higher fat content, a nascent marbling that promised unparalleled succulence. It represented a unique challenge, a higher degree of risk, but the culinary reward would be exceptional. The ethical line, for others, was an insurmountable wall. For me, it was merely another ingredient to consider, another variable in the pursuit of perfection. This was not a moral failing. It was a refinement of my art, an exploration of the absolute limits of flavor. I had acquired the specimen with careful planning, ensuring every detail was accounted for. He lay on the stainless steel table, small and still, his chest rising and falling with shallow, even breaths. The sedative worked its magic, holding him in a deep, peaceful slumber. I checked the restraints I had placed on his slender wrists and ankles, ensuring they held him secure against the cold surface. The surgical lights above brightened the room, casting stark shadows. I took up the scalpel, its honed edge glinting under the intense illumination. My hands moved with a practiced ease, adjusting the instrument, feeling its familiar weight. This was a precise operation demanding absolute concentration. I prepared the boy as I would any prized cut, meticulously, reverently. Every motion was deliberate, every decision based on the ultimate yield. The anticipation tightened in my chest. This would be the culmination of my culinary journey. A choked gasp escaped the boy's throat. His eyes flashed open, wide with terror, as awareness returned to his bound form on the table. He strained against the leather straps, a struggle for breath that went nowhere. I watched him. My scalpel, worn from the earlier preparations, rested in my hand. I moved to his head, placing my hand over his small face, covering his mouth and nose. His struggles intensified, then weakened. His body shuddered one last time, then went still. The room was quiet again. A faucet dripped in the corner. The work began. I guided the blade with practiced hands, making the initial incision across his chest, following the line I had marked. The skin peeled back, revealing the pale muscle beneath. The scent of blood filled the air, a familiar aroma. My movements were fluid, precise. I separated tissue from bone, working deeper, exposing the internal organs. This was a craft, a dedication to the anatomy, to the precise extraction of each component. I removed the desired cuts, placing them on a sterile tray next to the table, each piece a testament to careful selection and preparation. I wiped the last of the blood from my hands, admiring the work, when a soft knock echoed from the door at the far end of the room. I retrieved the small heart I had set aside, placing it into a prepared bag. I opened the door. The boy's parents stood there, their expressions unreadable, their eyes fixed on the bag in my hand. The mother stepped forward, her hand outstretched. "The heart?" she asked, her voice low. I handed the bag to her. She took it, clutching it to her chest. A knowing acknowledgement passed between us. A shared hunger gleamed in their eyes. I found a photograph of a child in the old album, a girl with clear eyes. Abby, I thought, a name that felt both familiar and distant. Who was this girl, Abby? I asked my father, holding the picture toward him. He looked at the photograph briefly, then returned his attention to his newspaper. His words came without inflection. Her parents died in a car crash when she was very young, quite tragic. He turned a page, the paper crinkling. She was placed into foster care outside of the state. We lost contact with her after that time. The way he spoke, so blandly, erased any sorrow from the event, making it only a cold fact. I could not understand his lack of emotion. An uncomfortable feeling began to spread through my chest, a vague memory trying to surface but staying out of reach. His casual dismissal of Abby's life deeply unsettled me, leaving an unsettling void. A memory clicked into place. I remembered visiting Abby. My father drove us to a small house with a white porch. A woman with a wide smile met us at the door, her hair pulled back tight from her face. She led us into a room where Abby sat at a small wooden table, coloring with stubby crayons. Abby looked up at me with large eyes but did not speak. The woman placed a hand on Abby's small shoulder. She said Abby had taken a vow of silence. She said Abby chose not to speak to anyone. I asked Abby if I could see her drawings, but she only looked at her paper. I tried to ask her about her crayons, about what colors she liked, but she never made a sound. She watched my face with her wide, still eyes. I did not understand a vow. I did not know why a child would choose to be so quiet. My parents talked to the woman for a long time. Then we went outside and got into the car. I remember turning my head to look through the back window as we drove away. Abby still sat at the table inside the house, her small hand holding a crayon. She watched us leave, her face not moving. I raised my hand in a small wave, but Abby did not wave back. She stayed still in the chair. The memory of Abby at the small wooden table no longer held its childish innocence. Her wide, still eyes, once simply quiet, now spoke of a desperate plea I had utterly failed to hear. It was not a vow of silence she had taken. It was a cage in which she sat, watching us leave, unable to speak, unable to move, unable to signal the suffering she surely endured. My small hand waving goodbye, her unmoving face in the window, all solidified into a single horrifying truth. I had abandoned her, just as my parents had, blinded by my youth and their calculated detachment. The family's casual indifference, once merely unsettling, now felt like a cold, deliberate act of forgetting, and I had been part of it. I lifted my phone, its screen glowing in my hand, and typed Abby's name into the search engine. There were no results, no images, no records of her life after that day. The vast expanse of the internet held no trace of the child we had left behind, swallowed by a system that rarely looked back. She was gone, a life lost to memory, and her current whereabouts were unknown, cementing an irretrievable loss that tightened around my chest. I walked to the kitchen and filled a glass with water. The ice cubes tumbled into the cold water with a soft clink. I drank the water slowly, sip after sip, letting the chill spread through me. I went into the basement often, always confident in its harmlessness. It was a utility space beneath the house, holding boxes and items we rarely needed. I often reassured my wife there was nothing to fear when I descended the wooden steps. Big spiders sometimes scurried across the cold concrete floor, their legs a frantic blur in dim light. Once, a mouse darted over my shoe, causing a sharp flinch, but these were simply small, harmless creatures. The air felt damp and cool, a natural consequence of being below ground. I sometimes experienced an odd prickle at the back of my neck, a distinct feeling of being watched from the darker corners where the bare bulb could not reach. I told myself this was my mind conjuring sensations, a response to quiet isolation, nothing to worry about. The basement was just a basement, and I always walked back upstairs feeling safe. The sensation of being watched intensified, settling into a cold, steady awareness emanating from the deepest shadows of the concrete floor. It was real. My wife had never once ventured into the basement, and her absolute refusal to step even 1 foot onto the top stair created a stark barrier. "I will not go down there," she stated, her voice holding a firm conviction that left no room for discussion. Her certainty strengthened my dread, solidifying a suspicion that the damp, cold utility room held more than just boxes and spiders. Something else was in its depths. It was time to retrieve the Christmas decorations, a routine yearly trip to the basement. I descended the wooden steps, the usual chill rising to meet me. The boxes were stacked against the far wall, and I located the one labeled ornaments before I pulled it free. As I turned back towards the stairs, the door above me swung shut. A sharp click echoed within the concrete walls, and the room plunged into absolute blackness, sealing me inside. I was immediately confined. The click of the latch had been absolute, sealing me inside, and I stood motionless in the complete darkness, my heart pounding against my ribs. A short time passed before I heard a sound from upstairs, which was my wife's voice, clearly speaking. Then another voice answered, sounding exactly like my own, and it was my voice that said, "The basement isn't that scary.